Today we're going to continue our series called The Game of Risk. How many remember the game? Come on, how many of you played it? Yeah, it's fun. If you've missed the first message in this series, you can always go to flfc.church and you can watch or listen to any of our messages there. But today we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to jump into our key text, which is Luke chapter 10, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4. So let's do this. Verse 1. The Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his fields. Now, I know we're very familiar with this verse, and we all like to pray for other people to do the work of the ministry. But now follow this. He's talking to the disciples. Now go, and remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Don't take any money with you, nor a traveler's bag, nor an extra pair of sandals, and don't stop to greet anyone along the road. Last week, we talked about being lambs among wolves. Today, we're going to talk about taking the right risks. Now, let me help you with something today. We all take risks. All of us. Every last one of us take risks. Turn to the person on your right. Get a good look at him. Get a good look. Look at him. That person you're looking at, that's a risk taker. Oh, yeah. Now look at the person on your left. Look at that other person. Oh, yeah, big risk taker there. That's a risk taker. We all take risks. Everybody does. You may be the safest person in the state of Idaho, but I guarantee you still take risks. A lot of us are thinking, well, I'm not really a risky person. You wouldn't categorize yourself as a risky person. And the reason for that is we only think of risks as risk if it's an unnecessary risk. If it's something we think we should do, if we think we want to do, if it has an outcome that we're in favor of, then it really doesn't register as risk to us. It's just something we do. But as soon as it becomes unnecessary, unwanted, unfavorable, well, now that is risky behavior. See, the question is not, will you take risks? The question is, what risks will you take? Did you hear me today? The question is not, will you take risks? The only question you have to answer is, which risks will you take? The simple truth is that most of us will spend our lives taking risks where we should not. It's awful quiet in here. The simple truth is most of us will spend our lives taking risks where we should not. And listen to this, even worse than that, worse, is that we'll spend our lives not taking risks where we should. See, there are many risks in life you shouldn't take, but there's also many risks in life that you should take. One of my old pastors used to say this, faith is spelled R-I-S-K. Faith is spelled R-I-S-K. You cannot truly walk in faith if you're not risking anything. You can't play it safe and walk in faith. Now, does that mean that all risk is faith? You can respond by a nod of the head. Does that mean that all risk is faith? I'm curious. Do you think that all risk is faith? You guys, your heads are stone cold. I'm like, not budging. I'm not going to answer. Because I know when I answer, he's going to spin it around and make me wrong. So is all risk faith? Yes, it is. I gotcha. Think about it. Every time you take a risk, you're putting your faith in something. Most of the time, you're not putting your faith in God. But when you get in the car, you're putting your faith in that car. You're putting the faith in that driver. You're putting your faith in the other drivers. When you take medicine, whether it's over-the-counter prescription, whatever it is, you're putting your faith in the doctor who prescribed it. You're putting your faith in the pharmacist who said it was okay. You're putting your faith into the pharmaceutical companies that put it together, that it's not going to kill you and that it is going to help you. You're putting your faith out there. Every single time you take a risk, you're using a form of faith. You're putting your faith in something, not necessarily in God. In fact, most of the risks we take have nothing to do with our faith in God at all. But it still involves faith. Every time you take a risk, you're putting your faith in something. Look at this. The dictionary defines risk as this: a situation involving exposure to danger. Now, danger can take on many forms, you understand. There's financial danger. There's emotional danger. Like, have you ever had anxiety about going to, let's say, a connect group where you don't know anybody? Come on, just be honest. Had a little bit of anxiety about that, a little bit of fear. It felt risky. Now, you knew nobody was going to beat you up or like, look at what you wear. Nobody was going to make fun of you. You knew all that wasn't going to happen. The fear you felt wasn't about danger. It was about the danger of being alone, being awkward, not having someone to talk to, not knowing what to expect. There's all kinds of perceived danger which limits our willingness to take risks. But the reality is we don't really think of risk in the form of danger. That's not how most of us categorize risk. We only think of it as danger that is not worth risking. Because if it's worth the risk, in our opinion, we don't call it risk. We only call it risk if we think it's not worth the danger. Let me give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I got to go to a beautiful wedding. Our very own Kelly and Randy, they're not here today, they're out on vacation, but they just got married a couple weeks ago in this very beautiful location. They got married at this gorgeous house. It was gorgeous. It was one of those houses that's right on the canyon rim. How many of you've seen these houses and wondered, how do people sleep in that house? And I thought, wow, this would be a beautiful house. I'd never get a night's sleep again in my life. There's no way I could soundly sleep 7 inches from the canyon rim. But it was a beautiful place to have a wedding. We're out in the yard, and it was picturesque. The sun was setting. It was perfectly romantic. It was amazing. And I'd say we were about, 100 feet back from the canyon rim. Nothing to protect us except the distance and the lawn, and that was it. But after the wedding ceremony, my good friend Jens, who's sitting right over here, you see, we were appreciating the view. And I'm going to try to help you picture how this was. So you got the canyon, and you've got the rim, okay? And you could get up like, this is how I was, and I'm still like 20 feet back from the rim, and I'm already like leaning like that's going to help if something bad happens. I know it's not going to help, but it made me feel better. Are you with me? I mean, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm just really scared of them. That's it. Okay, so I'm looking in there. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's 500 feet, 500 feet to the bottom. Now, for the most part, it's you kind of come up and the grass ends and there's some dirt area. Like, okay, that's off limits. It's too close. But then there was a space over here where there was a rock, and the rock was out there a little bit more. And if you could see the rock from the side, you could tell that the rock wasn't actually attached to anything. It was just a rock that was kind of held there by gravity, and it was kind of cantilevered, so it came back in. And so Jens was thinking, the view's not good enough here. No, I want to stand on the rock that's not actually attached to anything. Now, I don't think you people are really appreciating what I'm trying to tell you. This is where Jens was standing. This, 500 feet to instant death. Here is where he's standing. Here, free fall. Here, where he's standing. Here, nothing but air. Here, rock that doesn't look too secure. It was that close. It was It was crazy. And so I'm standing way back like, Jens, what are you doing? Why do you need to be that close? And he's like, what? He's like, this rock's been here for like 1,000 years. I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. And I'm like, wait a minute. There used to be a rock right in front of it. And one day, maybe it was a gazillion years ago, that rock left. How do you know today's not the day for that one? You don't know. He said, well, I never thought about it like that. You see, to Jens, standing on that rock was worth the risk. Maybe it was a thrill. Certainly had a better view than I did. He could actually see where he was going to die. I couldn't see that spot quite from where I was standing. But to me, it was an unnecessary risk. Wasn't worth it. Couldn't bring myself to do it. The return on investment didn't seem to be worth it. And see, that's how we process risk. If what we are risking for has a gain that we want. Now listen to me, I didn't say a gain that was good. I said a gain that we want. Then in our minds, it'll be worth the risk. But if it does not, then it's not worth the risk. According to a government website, they listed out the most common types of risky teenage behavior. Now, how many of you are aware that teenagers tend to take more risks? Anybody? So this is the list. And so some of their risks include regular alcohol use or abuse, binge drinking, regular tobacco use, marijuana use, other illegal drug use, fighting. Of course, they mean physical fist fighting, and risky sexual activity. Now, most of us, I think, would agree that everything I just listed is risky behavior. Come on, are you with me? Just nod along like, yep, I agree. Most of that, if not all of that, is behavior that I would consider high risk. But that's the thing. Risk is subjective. Risk is measured against our desired outcome. Why are you looking at me so weird? Risk is measured against our desired outcome. Why would anybody drink and drive? Why would anybody do that? Of course, nobody would say they want to do that, but many people, unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, when they've had too much to drink or for whatever's going on, they make a decision to get behind the wheel of a car. Why would they take that risk? Well, in that moment, A, they probably thought they weren't that drunk. B, they thought they could do it. C, they didn't want to bother anybody else. It was embarrassing. D, they thought they'd get away with it. And of course, we know statistically the vast majority of people do, but very sadly, many, many, many of them do not. And what happens when they do not? Cars are destroyed, lives are destroyed, and often innocent lives are destroyed. Why would anybody take a risk like that? I can see it all over your faces. How could anybody take such a terrible risk? The reality is you and I take risks all the time based on our perceived amount of danger and our return on investment. Let me give you some other examples. Another type of risk that we often take or don't take is financial risk. According to an article called Invested Wallet, or on the site Invested Wallet, 20% of Americans don't save any of their annual income at all. 20% don't save any. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. Zippo. Now, is saving money a risk? Well, kind of, because it's money you could spend right now. You go out to eat, you could make a car payment, you could upgrade your living style, your lifestyle. That's money you could use. So you are risking that money when you take it away from yourself and save it for a later date. And even worse than that, those who do save aren't putting away very much. Look at this. Over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for when they retire. Now, let me ask you a question. Is retirement a risk? I'm getting you with these trick questions today, aren't I? It's not. You're going to retire. It's 100% guaranteed. Sooner or later, you're going to stop working. You're not going to be able to break any more income. And you're not preparing for a maybe. You're preparing for the inevitable. Inevitably, all of us will at one point cease to be able to create income and have to live on what is available to us. Are you with me? Okay? So over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for when they retire. According to Dave Ramsey, listen to this, more financial risk, 80% of Americans are in debt. It's awful quiet in this church. Is debt a risk? Looks pretty unanimous around the room. People are nodding their heads yes. Statistically, 8 out of 10 of you are in debt. 80% of Americans are in debt, while only 20% of Americans save any of their annual income into savings. And less than 40% of Americans have $10,000 in savings for when they retire. You see, all of these represent a form of financial risk. But based on our perceived return on investment defines the activity that we will take. So 80% of us see the value in debt. And we're talking consumer debt here, not real estate debt, homes and stuff. We're talking about cars and credit cards and stuff like that. While only 20% see the value in savings. Are you with me today? Let's talk about another one of your favorite subjects, tithing. I know we all love it when I talk about tithing. According to AOL, only 7.4% of professed church-goers tithe. So these are the people that, according to their own testimony, regularly attend church. Now, the actual statistics said tithe at least 10%, and I always think that's weird. People put this mystique on the word tithe. Tithe just means 10%. That's what it means. So you can't, I've heard people say you can, but you can't tithe 5%. That's fiving, fifthing. I don't know what you call that, but it's not tithing. 10% or more, well, you're being generous above and beyond your tithe, but the tithe is only equal to the 10%. That's just how it is. It's not an opinion. This is just a fact of the definition of the words. Okay, are you with me? So if you're giving, you may be very generous on occasion with maybe big gifts to your church and whatever you do. But that doesn't mean you're tithing. And even if you're very, very generous on occasion, it's not the same thing as being obedient. Do you see the difference? Okay, so listen to this. What's more, out of the whole U.S. population, barely 3% of us tithe. Out of the whole U.S. population, less than 3% tithe. So now listen, I want you to understand, the reason that I'm bringing this up, I'm not trying to sneak in a jab about tithing. I'm just asking you to look at it from the perspective of risk. You see, we all take financial risks. We do. Either we're going to risk our finances with credit card debt, we're going to risk our income by saving some of it for later, saving for retirement, or tithing, or some combination thereof. You see, the reason that somebody does not tithe, there's just one reason, by the way. It's because they don't believe there's a return on the investment that's worth the risk. That's it. It really is that simple. You've weighed it out. You've said, well, could. And anybody, even if you get $1 a year, you could tithe. That would be 1 dime, 10 cents every year. That's all it is. And God would honor that just as much as somebody who gives $1 million a year. Do you understand it? It's completely fair. So you could tithe, but it's just in our minds, at least about 97% of us have said, well, that's kind of risky. I don't want to do that. That's rolling the dice on the tithing thing. Let's try credit card debt. Yes, much better, much more comfortable. And why would we do that? Because credit card debt gives me the return right now. I can go buy something I can't afford right now. I can spend money I don't have right now. Well, of course, there's a return on that. And because we get a return, even though we don't call it risk, we acknowledge that it's worth the risk. So we see even fewer and fewer Americans are saving, fewer are well prepared for retirement. And the fewest number of all, the fewest, are people who think it's worth the risk to tithe. Are you with me? Not really. Okay, but I'll keep going. See, we all take risks. Just say that with me. Say, I am a risk taker. We all take risks. No matter how safe you think you are, we all take risks. But we do not all take the right risks. Okay? Trust. Everybody say trust. Trust is a very big risk. Come on, are you with me? You acknowledge that trust. How many of you ever had trust violated? Oh, heck yeah. How many would say that's no fun at all? Yeah, that hurts. And what do we do when something hurts? It gets concrete cemented into the risk category. I am not going to do that again because that hurt. Therefore, the more experienced we are at being alive, the riskier it feels to trust people. I have humorously, and sometimes not so humorously, made this statement. I don't have trust issues. I absolutely know I can't trust anybody. In fact, until a relationship has put you in a vulnerable position, you have not really trusted the other person. Do you catch that? Until a relationship has actually put you into a vulnerable position, trust really hasn't been involved yet. So whether we're talking about friends, co-workers, family, dating relationships, or even spouses, if you've got yourself so well protected and guarded that nobody can hurt you, you, my good-looking friend, have trust issues. Because that's what we're doing. We're trying to protect ourselves from the risk of trust. We've been burned before, so we use protection mechanisms. We set ourselves up, and we rely on the one and the only person we know we can trust. And who is that? Ding, ding, ding. Now, that's not accurate. I think most of us know that, but that's who we think is the only person that we can trust. Am I saying that you should trust everyone? No way. That would be crazy. Absolutely, you should not trust everyone. That's a guaranteed way to get burned. But trusting no one is an even bigger risk than trusting everyone. And it's the wrong risk. Trust is a huge risk. See, here's what I have learned about most American Christians in my life. We love God. Now remember, what I'm talking about is most American Christians. We love God. We just don't trust Him. Think about that. Oh, we think He's great. Oh, yeah, God. Oh, yeah. Great guy. Love Him. Go to church every week. Every other week. I love God. I've got a bumper sticker. I got 3 Bibles. I even have a Christian t-shirt somewhere. We say we love God, but by our behavior, we demonstrate that we don't actually trust Him. You see, trust, remember, we just talked about it. Trust in any relationship is where you put yourself in a vulnerable position. And if you've never been in a vulnerable position, you've never, ever had to exercise any amount of trust whatsoever. Can you imagine if you were in a new romantic relationship? Those are exciting, right? And you felt like the other person didn't trust you. Is that relationship going to grow more intimate or less intimate? Of course it's going to be less intimate. You can't have intimacy where there is no trust. And you cannot have any trust if there is no vulnerability. In other words, if somebody can't hurt you, you don't trust them. I'm not talking about people who have no proximity. I'm talking about the people actually in your life. And if God is in your life and He is not in any position to hurt you, you have protected yourself even from God, as most people do. We may love Him, but we don't trust Him. So let's look at the scripture, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. I know you know it. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. But look at this other part. And do not depend on your own understanding. Don't depend on your own understanding. You see, our own understanding is our single greatest addiction as a culture today, hands down with no close second. I don't care what you talk about, meth, sex addiction, any kind of alcohol or drugs, you name it, anger, you name all the ugly addictions that are ugly and on all of us, and any addiction that we deal with, none of it even holds a candle to the addiction that most of us, including you and I, have to being addicted to our own understanding. You see, we live in a culture today where our own understanding is this untouchable safe zone that we're allowed to walk around in like those people in those sumo fat suits, bumping into each other because we've inflated ourselves with this bubble of our own understanding. And if you don't like my understanding, if it conflicts with your understanding, boom, skadoosh, and people go flying. You see, we've absolutely given ourselves permission to have our own understanding as the end-all, be-all of truth in our world today. And do you think that people in the church are different than that? Honestly, sometimes I think we're the worst. Because here's what we do. We take our Bible, the good book. We barely crack it open and read it, but we're familiar with a few passages that we've heard and the memes we've seen on Facebook or social media. So we have an impression about God. We like the parts about grace. His grace is new every morning. Great is His faithfulness. We love the part about love. We love those parts about forgiveness. We love Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans that I have for you, saith the Lord. They are good and not bad. They are plans for good and not for evil. Oh, we just get goosebumps when we quote those verses. But we don't really know Him. We don't really know what His nature's like, what His character's like. And so we take our impression that we get from the memes and what other people say, what we like, and we are really talented at avoiding what we don't like. And then we hear what our friends say. We see what the TV says, and we see how society's changing. We need to be more tolerant. We need to be more accepting. We need to just let people be the way they're going to be. And so we blur all this together in this sludge of beliefs. And we know we can't really defend a single one of them. So we preface it with, well, I think. Well, I believe. And whenever we say, well, I think, or well, I believe, we're probably about to go down on a choose your own adventure made up belief. Why? Because the safest place we feel is not just leaning on our own understanding, it's fully founded on our own understanding. And that's why this verse is so important. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And what are those next two words? Because they're really important. Really messes the whole thing up if you miss those next two. Do not lean on your own. Do not depend. Do not depend on your own understanding. Can you imagine what that looks like for just a moment? I mean, just being really real. What does it look like to not depend on your own understanding? I mean, think of a time when you didn't depend on your own understanding. Have you ever been lost? You're in an unfamiliar area and somebody else is driving or somebody else is navigating. And they're like, no, you need to go left, you need to go left. But everything within you says, no, I need to go right. And you make the conscious decision, well, you've been here more than I have, so we'll go with you. Come on, how many of you can relate to an experience like that? That's what it means to lean not on your own understanding. It means that you trust the other person, whether it's a coworker, friend, or the Almighty God. You say, okay, this is what I think, but I'm going to put my opinion on hold. I'm going to restrain it. I'm going to subdue it. I'm going to submit it and say, whatever you say, that's what I'm going to do. That's what it means to lean not on your own understanding. If you are only willing to follow someone as long as you agree, you're not actually following anybody. You're actually following yourself. So let me ask you a question. Do you trust God? Think about it. You don't have to answer. But let me help you. I'm saying, do you really trust God? I get that you trust God's not going to hurt you. Okay, that's not what I'm asking you. I get that. You wouldn't be here if you thought God was out to get you. Okay? I'm not asking if you think God won't hurt you. I'm not asking if you think God loves you, because that's a form of trust. Yeah, I trust that God loves me. Okay. But do you trust Him? Do you trust Him? If He says to go left when you really want to go right, do you trust that He's been there before you and He knows the way? Or do we struggle in those moments of decision? Do we say things like, well, I deserve to be happy? Give me a break. Why do you deserve to be happier than anybody else? When is our deserving of happiness a reliable navigator for our life choices? And who have you ever heard anybody say at the beginning of a great testimony of great success and happiness say, well, you know what? It came down to this one day when I realized what I really needed was to be happy. So I forsook everybody in my life and now I'm happy. Those stories never end that way. Taking your life into your own hands is the exact opposite of leaning not on your own understanding and leaning on your own understanding. Do you hear me today? Do you really trust God? I want you to think of a trapeze. Think of this. Now, aside from being maybe the scariest thing I could ever imagine, there's no way for the trapeze to reach the second swing without first letting go of the first one. Can't be done. In fact, the only way for a trapeze artist to truly reach that second swing is to let go of the safe, comfortable, reliable place where they started. That's how it works in the kingdom of God. You can't have God's will for your life without letting go of yours. You can't experience God's blessing, God's real blessing and favor in your life without letting go of your own blessing and your own favor. You'll never truly see what God has for your life without letting go of the safety of your own understanding. You cannot trust God and lean on your own understanding. Let's keep going. Proverbs chapter 3, the next verse. Seek his will in all that you do, and he will show you which path to take. How many would like God to show you which path to take? Okay, there was a preface to that. Seek his will in all that you do. Not just the stuff you don't know. All. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, I love the word instead there. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. You see, we love the part about barns full of grain, and we love to hear about that new wine. We love it. We love to talk about the blessing, but we like to skip over verses like verse 9 that say, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. See, we love God, but according to our behavior, we just don't trust him. We want everything that God has for us, but we're afraid to risk what we already have. And that's really what it comes down to. We want the things we read about in the Bible. We want the experiences we read about those who really trust him. We're just afraid to risk what we already have. But that's the deal. You have to let go of what you have before you can walk in what God has for you. That's the lesson he's teaching his disciples in Luke chapter 10. When he says, now go and don't take any money. Don't take a traveler's bag. Don't take an extra pair of sandals. Why would he do that? It's like, Jesus, why are you trying to make it harder for them to serve you? That's what we'd say today. But he's, with a practical exercise, saying to them, trust me with all of your heart and don't lean on your own understanding. What was the one way to guarantee these guys were not going to lean on their own understanding? They had to leave their understanding at home. Their wallets, their bags, their money, even extra shoes, even basic necessities. They had to leave it behind. And you might say today, but it makes no sense. Of course it makes no sense until you understand Proverbs chapter 3. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not depend on your own understanding. I believe the reason we see fewer and fewer miraculous events in our culture today is because we have lost our sense of risk. Are you with me today? So we've already established that you are a risk taker, but the question is, are you taking the right risks? If the return on investment that we are looking for is our own comfort, it's our own entertainment, our own pleasure, or even our own happiness, then I guarantee you will take the wrong risks. Now, do you think I'm saying that you should be unhappy? Of course not. But if any of us lived like most of the people in the first church that we read about in the book of Acts, we would think those choices are a one-way ticket to misery, and we would be afraid to do it. As long as our pleasure, our comfort, our security, if that's the return on investment we're looking for, we're probably going to take the wrong risks. But if our goal is to serve the Lord and put our trust in him, then we'll take the right risks. Look at this. If this sounds like I'm being hard on you today, listen to this. Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way. Take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, If you give up your life for my sake, if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? That is the right risk. So you're going to take a risk. Did you hear me today? You are going to take risks in your life. But are you taking the right risks? Putting our life in the hands of God. Leaning not on our own understanding. Walking away from all the things that our culture says that we have every right to pursue. And you do, according to our culture, have the right to pursue those things. But when we deny ourselves that option, and we take the great risk of following Jesus Christ, I don't mean just believing in him. I mean truly following him. Doing what his word tells us, even where it doesn't line up with popular opinion. Doing what it tells us, even when it means less for us. Doing what it tells us, no matter what it costs us. That is the right risk. And when our lives are completely over, when our time is up, whether it's many, 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 many years from now or later on today, no matter when it is, when our time is up, we will learn in that moment that was the only risk that really mattered. Not another thing we risked for or gained will mean anything when we're standing face to face with our Almighty God. And we have to give an account for the choices we made in relationship to him.